One of the first visible signs of the 2026 El Niño is not a storm, a flood, or a temperature record. It is a disappearing band of microscopic life stretching across the Pacific Ocean. NASA's PACE satellite compared chlorophyll concentrations in June 2025 with June 2026. In the central equatorial Pacific, the difference was striking. Waters that had contained a broad band of phytoplankton a year earlier had become much less productive as El Niño strengthened. The organisms disappearing from the satellite image are tiny, but they sit at the base of one of the largest food systems on Earth. Phytoplankton are microscopic organisms that use sunlight to produce organic matter. They contain chlorophyll, the same pigment that helps plants absorb light on land. From space, NASA cannot count individual cells. Instead, the PACE satellite measures subtle differences in the blue and green light reflected from the ocean and uses those signals to estimate chlorophyll concentration. That chlorophyll effectively becomes a biological map. More chlorophyll usually indicates more phytoplankton near the surface. Less chlorophyll suggests that the ocean is producing less microscopic plant life, and in June 2026, a large region of the central equatorial Pacific turned noticeably less green. To understand why, we need to look below the surface. The tropical Pacific receives enormous amounts of sunlight. Light is therefore not usually the main limitation on phytoplankton growth near the equator. The real problem is food. Phytoplankton need nutrients such as nitrate, phosphate, and iron. Those nutrients often accumulate in deeper water after dead organisms sink and decompose. Normally, strong easterly trade winds push warm surface water westward across the Pacific. As that surface water moves away from the eastern and central equatorial region, colder water rises from below to replace it. This process is called upwelling. The rising water acts like a conveyor belt carrying nutrients from the deep ocean into the sunlit surface layer. Phytoplankton use those nutrients, reproduce rapidly, and support the food web above them, but El Niño interferes with that conveyor belt. As the event develops, the equatorial trade winds weaken. Warm surface water spreads eastward, and the warm upper layer of the Pacific becomes deeper. That makes it harder for cold, nutrient-rich water to reach the surface. Imagine placing a thicker blanket over a refrigerator. The cold material is still underneath, but it becomes harder for it to reach the top. During El Niño, the Pacific develops something similar. A deeper layer of warm water separates sunlight at the surface from nutrients below. Phytoplankton suddenly have plenty of light but less food. NASA's June 2026 chlorophyll map shows the biological consequence. The strongest reduction appeared in the central Pacific near the equator, north of New Zealand. NASA oceanographers Matthew Carley and Graham Trolley said this decline is expected during El Niño because weakened trade winds suppress the upwelling that normally feeds phytoplankton. And the event may only be beginning. El Niño had officially arrived by June 2026, and NOAA's Climate Prediction Center expected it to continue strengthening through the end of the year, with a 97% probability at the time of NASA's report that conditions would last into early Northern Hemisphere spring 2027. NASA scientists therefore expect the low chlorophyll region to become more pronounced as El Niño develops. That could mean even lower concentrations inside the current zone, a larger area of reduced phytoplankton, or both, depending largely on how the trade winds evolve. This is where the story moves from microscopic organisms to animals humans can actually see. Zooplankton eat phytoplankton. Small fish eat zooplankton. Larger fish eat those fish. Seabirds, marine mammals, and humans depend on the animals higher in that chain. Remove part of the phytoplankton supply and the effects can travel upward through the ecosystem. The eastern Pacific provides one of the clearest examples. The waters off Peru normally contain some of the most productive fisheries on Earth because coastal upwelling delivers nutrients to phytoplankton. Anchovies thrive in this environment. During strong El Niño conditions, warm surface water suppresses that upwelling. Phytoplankton decline, fish distributions change. Predators that depend on them can suddenly struggle to find enough food. NASA notes that Peru's anchovy fisheries have experienced major catch declines during previous El Niño events for exactly this reason. In 2026, Peru repeatedly suspended fishing in the north-central zone to protect the resource, while pelicans were reported moving into ports and urban areas in search of food. A satellite looking at ocean color can therefore reveal the early stages of a food shortage before many of the larger ecological consequences become obvious. That is what makes the 2026 event scientifically unusual. NASA has observed El Niño from space many times, but pace is different. The mission launched in February 2024 and carries the Ocean Color Instrument, or OCI. It observes the ocean across many closely spaced wavelengths of visible light rather than relying on a smaller number of broad color bands. That means the 2026 El Niño will be the first complete El Niño event monitored globally by PACE, with near-daily hyperspectral ocean color measurements. Previous satellites could tell scientists roughly how much chlorophyll was present. PACE can potentially tell them much more about which phytoplankton communities are changing. Not all phytoplankton are the same. Some are tiny cyanobacteria. Others are larger diatoms protected by silica shells. Different groups prefer different temperatures, nutrient concentrations, and light conditions. They also support different food webs and participate differently in the carbon cycle. NASA scientists hope to use PACE data to determine how specific phytoplankton communities respond as the 2026 El Niño evolves. This matters for climate as well as ecology. Phytoplankton absorb carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. Some are eaten immediately, but a fraction of the organic material they produce eventually sinks into deeper water. That process helps transfer carbon from the atmosphere and surface ocean into the deep sea. If El Niño alters where phytoplankton grow and which species dominate, it can also change how carbon moves through the Pacific. The relationship is complicated because El Niño modifies temperature, winds, rainfall, ocean circulation, and ecosystems simultaneously. But chlorophyll gives scientists a way to watch one important part of that transformation almost in real time. And there is another twist. The phytoplankton decline does not necessarily end when El Niño ends. After some El Niño events, the equatorial Pacific experiences a chlorophyll rebound. Concentrations can rise above normal even without an immediate transition into La Niña. Research cited by NASA suggests that this recovery can be helped by additional iron entering the equatorial Pacific through ocean currents and by dust transported from unusually dry regions of Central and South America. Iron is required only in tiny quantities, but in parts of the ocean it can determine whether phytoplankton grow at all. That means the biological response to El Niño can continue long after the warmest surface temperatures have disappeared. The Pacific may first lose phytoplankton as upwelling collapses, then later experience a surge when nutrient conditions reorganize again. A strong La Niña can amplify that rebound even further. NASA points to the 1998 to 1999 La Niña when elevated chlorophyll concentrations contributed to a large phytoplankton bloom in the eastern Pacific and fish populations increased dramatically. This cycle reveals why El Niño is much more than an atmospheric weather pattern. It changes the physical structure of the ocean. Winds weaken, warm water shifts, upwelling declines. Nutrients disappear from the surface. Phytoplankton fall, fish and predators respond. Then the system reorganizes again. The satellite image from June 2026 captures only one frame in that sequence. But it may be one of the earliest biological warnings of how large this El Niño could become. NASA can already see the Central Pacific losing chlorophyll. Scientists expect the signal to strengthen if the event continues developing. Over the coming months, PACE will repeatedly scan those waters and reveal whether the low productivity region expands, which phytoplankton groups disappear first, and where biological recovery eventually begins. For people watching El Niño from land, the event may appear as changing rainfall, drought, storms, or heat. From space, another version is unfolding. A vast green ecosystem is fading from part of the Pacific. The change begins with weakened winds and a missing supply of nutrients from the deep ocean, but its consequences can climb through the entire marine food web. And for the first time, scientists have a satellite capable of watching that biological transformation across more colors of light than ever before.